Well, welcome to the 700 Club. The U.S. military is starting its pullout from Syria, and roughly 2,000 troops are now in the process of coming home. The news arrives just one day after a major speech on Middle East policy by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Secretary Pompeo delivered his speech in Cairo during a 9-day tour of the Middle East. Afterwards, he gave CBN News an exclusive interview, telling our Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell why he believes America is a force for good in the region.
Secretary of State Pompeo came to Cairo knowing many allies are concerned about President Trump's decision to pull U.S. troops out of Syria. Pompeo told CBN News the region will see a strong America pick up the foreign policy mantle it's historically held in the Mideast. We interviewed Pompeo at a newly dedicated church built by Egypt for Coptic Christians.
You just had a major speech about the Middle East, and 10 years ago another major speech was given here in Cairo. Would it be fair to say that your speech was America is back and it's a force for good?
Absolutely. I want people throughout the Middle East and the world to know that America's involvement in the Middle East is absolutely a force for good. We come here with no intention to oppress or to dominate, but rather to free, to create opportunities for every individual throughout the Middle East to live their life and to have the freedoms that we are all so blessed to have in the United States.
Pompeo's speech came 10 years after then-President Obama delivered his blueprint for the Middle East in Cairo.
He told you that the United States and the Muslim world needed, quote, a new beginning, end of quote. The results of these misjudgments have been dire.
The Secretary of State said that President Obama's timid, hesitant, and apologetic policy allowed ISIS, Iran, and other terrorists to thrive.
We learned that when America retreats, chaos often follows. When we neglect our friends, resentment builds. And when we partner with our enemies, they advance.
Pompeo said that all changed as the Trump administration pushed to decimate ISIS, confront Iran, and stand up to Syria's President Assad.
The good news is this: the age of self-inflicted American shame is over, and so are the policies that produce so much needless suffering. Now comes the real new beginning.
Part of that new beginning is forging a global alliance against Iran.
One of your themes of the trip is about Iran and the danger to the Middle East. Do you see nations aligning up with the United States against the influence of Iran?
So our team has done good work. We've built an enormous coalition that ranges from Asia to North Africa, certainly to the Middle East, countries from all across the world, understanding that the threat from the Islamic Republic of Iran is real and continuing and ought not to be tolerated.
Another issue is in Syria, as Turkey's President Erdogan is threatening U.S. allies.
A few hours ago, you met with leaders in Erbil about the Kurds, and yet there's dangerous talk coming out of Turkey. What's your message to Erdogan if he goes ahead and invades the Kurds?
Well, our message is straightforward. The work that the Kurdish forces did with us alongside in Syria has been important. It took down a caliphate, 99% of the real estate that was held by ISIS. We remember people sitting in cages being burned. It seems like a long time ago, but frankly, it's the good work that the United States did with a big coalition. And we'll work with the Turks to make sure that there's security for them as well, and that the Kurdish people in Syria are indeed protected.
What about the Christians in the region? They have an appeal that they won't be eradicated, that Christianity won't be eradicated. What's your message to those Christians?
That America is with them. Christianity is at the heart of the history of this place here in the Middle East. All you got to do is grab a Bible and read the places and the names. Christians have been central to the Middle East. We want to make sure that they continue to have opportunities and freedom, and for Christian churches to grow alongside churches of other faiths as well. Our message is simple, is that we stand for religious freedom every place American diplomacy is at work.
Secretary Pompeo told us he wanted to pass along a simple but powerful message, that the United States stands for religious freedom every place American diplomacy is at work. There could not have been a better place to deliver it. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Cairo.
And what a contrast between the two speeches. You go back 10 years, and within the Muslim world, Obama's speech is referred to as the sermon, and they actually count the number of shoulds and musts that he expressed, and that what for his administration was a landmark speech. The hope was 10 years ago to pull together all the different players and recognize them and let them know that they had a seat at the table, and then encourage them that, you know, in the West, to use a geographic term, in the West, that they would be honored and women would be able to wear whatever dress they wanted to wear in public. But at the same time, in the Muslim world, there needed to be changes. Well, the problem with all of that was it gave legitimacy to groups that had already been labeled as terrorist groups by their own government. And specifically in Egypt, it gave legitimacy to the Muslim Brotherhood. They now had a seat at the table at a presidential address, and that seat was actually mandated by the Obama administration. They insisted that the Muslim Brotherhood be invited. At the same time that's going on, the Director of National Security under the Obama administration tried to claim that the Muslim Brotherhood was some kind of social welfare organization, and completely ignoring its history. In the aftermath of the Arab Spring, was it any surprise that this now legitimate Muslim Brotherhood takes control over Egypt? That was a tragic day. So when we look at the mistakes, if you will, from 10 years ago, the high aspirations of that speech, but then not recognizing what it took on the ground to make things work, are we repeating it 10 years later? I'm all for bringing troops home, but are we going to see another vacuum of power in a very volatile region? The pullout of the troops in Iraq 10 years ago was the trigger and the signal for ISIS to arise. The Obama speech was a trigger and a signal for the Muslim Brotherhood to rise. So we shouldn't do that anymore. That's something we need to be there and say to our allies there, we're here. We're here to maintain peace, and we're here to make sure that ISIS never rises again, that these terror groups do not have authority here. It's my hope, my prayer, that this administration gets that message, and we're there to stay and stay there for our allies. Well, in other news, it's payday for government workers, but many won't be getting a check. Ephraim Graham has more of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom.
Gordon, as the government shutdown nears its third week, the impact is starting to hit federal employees hard. Still, President Trump and Democratic leadership show no signs of giving in. Dale Hurd has the story.
In day 21 of the president's shutdown showdown with the Democrats, the stakes keep getting higher as this looks to become the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. President Trump and his supporters want a wall on the southern border with Mexico. And he told Fox's Sean Hannity that he's getting closer to declaring a national emergency in order to get it done.
If we don't make a deal with Congress, most likely I will do that. I would actually say I would.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham told the president on Twitter, "Mr. President, the Democrats are not working in good faith with you. Declare emergency. Build the wall now." Inside the Senate, Democrat Chuck Schumer demanded that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell allow members to vote on legislation to reopen the government.
So why aren't we voting on them? Because Leader McConnell is hiding behind President Trump.
But Republican Senator James Langford believes Democrats want the crisis to escalate.
Lately, what I'm hearing from Democrat colleagues is they quietly hope the president will declare a national emergency and will build the wall out of something else, and so they can go back to their base and to say, I stood strong against the president, but he did it anyway.
Pressure is mounting to find an escape hatch from the 3-week impasse that has closed parts of the government. Some 800,000 workers, more than half of them still on the job, will miss their first paycheck today under the stoppage. They came out in protest in cities across the country. Some fear losing their homes.
I mean, we're not driving the bus on this. We're under the bus on this.
The president also has to fight the media's message, which Scott Whitlock of Newsbusters says is firmly on the side of the Democrats.
They're very much taking the Democratic talking points as to who is to blame for the shutdown, and they're blaming the president.
And it looks like the shutdown will go on. The president has canceled an upcoming trip to Davos, Switzerland later this month. Meanwhile, he's consulting with attorneys on the use of his emergency powers and with the Army Corps of Engineers on finding money for the wall. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
A Democratic congresswoman is calling out her party for religious bias against Catholics. In an op-ed for The Hill, Hawaii Representative Tulsi Gabbard criticizes Democratic leaders targeting judicial nominees for their beliefs. One example, Brian Bisher, a nominee for the U.S. District Court, who is a practicing Catholic and a member of the Knights of Columbus. Democrat Senators Kamala Harris and Mazie Hirono raised the issue of Bisher's faith during his nomination hearings last fall, questioning whether he could separate his beliefs from his rulings. And in 2017, Senator Dianne Feinstein targeted judicial nominee Amy Coney Barrett's Catholic beliefs, saying, "The dogma lives loudly within you." On a Fox News special report with Brett Baer, CBN's David Brody says it is a big problem for the Democratic Party.
I truly believe that the Hillary Clinton language, when she talks about how these shared religious or these religious views need to be done away with, is what she's talked about. Barack Obama talking about clinging to your guns and religion. We've heard that before. I mean, you can go down the line. There has been a systematic removal, if you will, of faith from the Democrat Party. Ask the pro-life Democrats. Where are they in this party?
In her op-ed, Gabbard wrote, "The party that worked so hard to convince people that Catholics and Knights of Columbus like Al Smith and John F. Kennedy could be both good Catholics and good public servants shows an alarming disregard of its own history in making such attacks today." Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio says a significant number of Democrats support the BDS movement against Israel. Rubio made that statement in a tweet after some Democrats opposed his measure to allow state and local governments to boycott businesses that take part in the BDS movement. Now, BDS stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. It's led to increased boycotts of Israel in support of the Palestinians. Oklahoma Senator James Lankford tells CBN News many Democrats do support BDS, but says Palestinians are doing well under Israeli businesses, so hurting Israeli businesses also hurts Palestinians.
There are some Democratic colleagues that do support the BDS movement, and that's a concern for me. The vast majority of Americans are supportive of Israel. They're also supportive of economic development for the Palestinian people, and I think we can do both.
And Israel has been pushing back against the BDS movement. Gordon?
Well, it's time for Democrats to stand up for Israel. Bernie Sanders has already weighed in on this and essentially said, well, it's against American values that if state governments, local governments pass boycott bills, that any industry, any company that boycotts Israel will then be boycotted in contracts in the state or in that locality. He's saying, well, that's against free speech. Senator Rubio rightly pointed out, well, is it okay to boycott Israel? But it's not okay to boycott the companies that are boycotting Israel. You get into this absurdity that just doesn't make any sense unless you say, well, somehow or other Senator Sanders is not standing up for Israel. He's standing up for the boycott movement. So are we going to push forward to a vote and actually find out who in the Senate is for BDS? I'm not sure that's going to happen, but it might be good for the Democrats to stand up to say, we support Israel. We're behind Israel. The American people are behind Israel. At the same time that the Democrats are standing up for Catholics and the right of Catholics to hold judgeships in America. Let's say there is no religious test for office, for sitting for a judge. We can't have that. That's not part of who we are as a people. The divide is starting to get a little starker. And when you look right now at some of the radical parts of the Democratic Party pushing for socialism, which is also pushing for atheism, well, where are we going as a country? So Christian Democrats, please, it's time to stand up.